Hello and welcome to this video. My name's Claire and a friend has asked me to talk through the process of digital painting. This is something I've been doing for 3 years or so, and she asked me to talk through it as a process, so here I am. Bear in mind this is very much an overview from start to finish on a digital painting of a clematis. So here we go. And the first thing to think about, of course, is what exactly am I going to paint and with what kind of composition. This is exactly the same as it would be in any artistic situation. I happen to be in this project using Pixara Twisted Brush Pro, but you could be using any digital painting software, ArtRage, Photoshop Elements, possibly even something like Paint.net or Pixlr that's free online. It really doesn't matter, the principles are the same, and that's what we're going to be going through in this overview. But looking here, this is of course a photograph, and it was the only photograph of clematis that I could find in my collection of photos. I do try and use my own reference photography as much as possible. We took a photo of this, and I say we because I can't remember if it was me or my husband, at Kenwood House, and I'm looking at it, and the first thing I notice is that these flowers are really pretty, but they seem to have 5 petals each, and I'm thinking back, if not 6 actually, and I'm thinking back to a clematis that was round the front door of our cottage when I was a kid. It was really sweet, and it had these little white flowers, but they had sort of mauvey centres, and that's really what I think of when I'm thinking of clematis. So it's really that I'm wanting to paint here, and I'm pretty sure that those clematis had just 4 little petals and their mauvey centres. And I have done a quick check online, and it seems that there can be all sorts of numbers of petals for clematis, and it's still clematis. If you really want to know, the standout thing about clematis is apparently that it's a vine, and it's got a vine structure, and that might be useful later on in this tutorial. But so for now I'm showing you a sort of reference photo, but also how almost immediately you begin to depart from a reference photo and get into the painting, and how it becomes something completely other. But let's move on to the beginning of the process. And this very unexciting screen is the beginning of the process. For something like this, I nearly always start with a black background. The main reason for this is that I then know that when I colour on top of it, I have put in enough colour for it to stand up against any background, and so it will never look insipid. So here we are, starting on black, but if you are digitally painting, what I would say is start with a black background layer, but don't put anything else on top of it. Just keep that layer as it is, and do all your subsequent painting, drawing, everything else on different layers. What this gives you at the end, when you come to save your painting in all its different forms, it'll give you flexibility, so you can save it against any kind of background you want, or even take the background out completely and still have a design to put in all sorts of places, you know, your Zazzles, your Cafe Press, your other pod sort of sites, or to make into something that has a plain white background, perhaps if you make digital collage sheets. Loads of things you can do with these kinds of images, but having a black background and then being able to take it out is a great thing, and so please just leave that background layer exactly as it is and refrain from painting on it. Paint on the next layer up or any other layer you like, but leave that black background alone. Okay, so enough about black backgrounds, let's move on. The next stage is just to draw out where the clematis are going to be. I've got a really sort of classical 5 flowers here, you know, odd numbers being nicer on the eye somehow, and the focus here is on the clematis that's on the at the front, nearest to the left, and very slightly more blurred those back clematis. I will do my best to keep to that during this painting, although sometimes I don't always remember that the things at the back are more blurred, although I should, of course, because they're further away. But I've started out with that intention in mind here. And you just see I've got the very basic shapes here. I'm using the digital oil pastel setting in Pixara Twisted Brush. But as I say, this is an overview. You could be using any tools. If you like this video and you want more information on this, then I'll certainly go into the use of the different tools in more detail. But there we go. See how simple and how basic. The only vague amounts of detail I've put in is what the leaf shapes might look like and where the centres would be. They have that kind of fluffiness with stalky bits coming out, and they have begun to come in here. So we've got all our shapes in their basic proportions and their basic positions. Okay, and next, the next stage doesn't look very spectacular either, does it? All I've done here is to assign a white to the petals just to check that they look like they should with some colour in them, but it's all very flat. And looking at that, at this stage I can see that I wanted a mauviness in those petals, and going from this to a mauviness is not going to happen because already there is a pinkiness in there with the shade of white that I've chosen. And in the next stage that becomes even more apparent to me because I've tried to put in those centre bits, and there we go. Far from a mauviness, it's a sort of pale marooniness, which might be lovely on some clematis, but it's not what I'm aiming for. And at this point I had to say stop for a little while. Thought, where am I going with this? It felt like, was it going anywhere at all? Wasn't at all sure. And so I welshed out of the colour issue completely, went back to the reference image and started thinking instead about the leaves and this clematis as a vine structure. One of the reasons I love painting flowers actually is that you get to know sort of the character of the flower, the fact that this is based on a vine, the fact that it's got that cascadingness. Somehow looking at all flowers is a much richer experience when you've looked at them to draw or paint them in this way, and that's something that I'm sure goes well beyond the digital sphere, although it's digital that we're talking about here. And looking here, you can see it's a vine, it's a cascade. And so by the time we come to the next stage, there is in fact, and I know I should have taken a complete process photo of just the leaves here, and I forgot, so sorry. But here we go. You can see that there is a sort of a leaf structure there. In fact, if you were to take away all those flowers, I merged the layers too quickly, and so I can't give you a process photo on this. But if you were to take away those flowers, you would get a lattice work of vine, not just vine leaves, but vine stems. And I tend to draw in the entire lattice work, the entire support of anything that's going to be underneath something else, if it'll be peeping through in any way. You could argue this is overkill, and yes, it does make your file sizes a bit bigger, which is something to consider, but then it means you've got complete freedom to have anything you like peeping through, and you get a real sense of it being, somehow it makes it into a more solid thing, even if there's stuff underneath that you never see. I'm not quite sure why that is. Maybe it's just something in my head, but that's part of the process, and it seems to work for me at this point. Try it out if you wish. And so moving on from that, you can see I've decided to put in extra leaves there because a vine structure is lovely, but leaves are prettier. And so leaves go in there. We're beginning to get something that looks a bit more like a clematis you might want to have in a painting, put on your objects, do whatever you want with. And there, finally, at this point, came up with the right shade of mauviness to begin to add to the petals. Mauviness is such an official kind of word, isn't it? In fact, what I've done there, I realised that to get that mauviness, the correct white for the clematis was actually a very, 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 very pale shade of blue white, and getting most of the mauviness. In fact, it's not quite the same mauve on all the flowers because they're going to have different light very slightly from back to front, but there's more blue in that mauviness than there is anything else. And with the digital oil pastels, it's basically a stroking motion. As I say, I can explain this in more detail in other videos if you'd like, it's a stroking motion from the center of the petal out to the edge and then back out from the edge into the center, and you just you stroke away between the darkest blue and the whitest blue white until it really looks like a blended petal kind of color and influence in the center. But of course there's more to petals than that, and you'll notice here I've also begun to add in very small lines, because most petals have very thin lines of darker colour, and it's those thin lines that make their way almost like veins through the petal up from the bottom to the top. And looking at this, I was beginning to think that yes, this was something that had possibilities, but it's still kind of messy, isn't it? And so the next stage was to rub out any extraneous bits that were causing the edge of the petals to lose sharpness. That's digital oil pastels are lovely to work with, but one of the problems with them is that it's very easy for things to go kind of misty and to lose definition, and so using an eraser tool in your digital painting program is very handy, and so you make the shapes of the petals out of negative space with that, and they sharpen up a little bit more. Also, not enough shadow here. These are looking very flat. The whitest whites are not white enough. The shadows are not dark enough. I haven't been bold enough there yet, and the leaves have no shadows either. So that's the difference between this picture and what we end up with in the end. See more definition, shadows, lightest lights, darkest darks, looking a lot more like it. And I thought to myself at this point, this would probably be a really good place to stop. I can't remember who it was who said paintings and things are never done, you know, they just stop in interesting places. It was somebody famous and worthy, and I really can't remember who they are, but it was somebody famous and worthy and all of that. But of course, being me, I experimented a bit more and thought, is there more to do here? And one of the things you can do with digital painting is to put backgrounds on afterwards. And so with a very blurry coarse digital oil pastel setting, the rest was done in either regular digital oil pastel or fine digital oil pastel, with a coarser, bigger setting on the digital brush. I experimented with putting some colours behind the flowers, and what an well, I personally think this is a completely epic fail. Totally destroys the delicacy of what I've been aiming at hitherto. Look at it, didn't like it one bit. I think it is because those flowers are so white and so delicate, and the black gives them some drama. But these colours didn't like at all. Didn't like them at all, and the beauty of digital painting, of course, is that as long as things are on separate layers, you can just remove that background again and get back to where you were. Phew! I thought I'd learned my lesson by this point, and this was a really good place to stop. Although, of course, in digital, the real beauty is that you get something lovely that's on your computer, but it can go on to other items and other things and become a design so easily. And so in this case, amongst other things, this ended up looking really pretty on a little necklace design like this. What would you do with it? I don't know. But please, if you have ideas about what sort of thing this would go on, please let me know in the comments. And in general, of course, please do let me know whatever you think of this video in the comments. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please thumbs up and subscribe. And if you'd like, I'll do some more. Other than that, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you very much and have a great day. Bye for now.